I'm going to be trying to start quite rapidly. We've got half an hour to get through the first part of this webinar, which is about the 2020 topics, of which there are quite a few. And then we'll be moving on, and Professor Ronald McQuaid from the University of Stirling will be joining us for his evaluation tips. And then there'll be a couple of shorter presentations about embedding SSH across Horizon 2020 and also the latest on EU exit, followed by a Q&A. I should say that any project-specific questions should be emailed directly to me. That email address that you can see at the bottom there, challenge6ncp@esrc.ukri.org. You can email anything to that anytime, all year long, not just at the webinar. But yeah, I'll be answering general questions during this webinar and not project-specific ones. Great, so let's get started. This first bit is about Societal Challenge 6, Europe in a Changing World. As I said, there'll be a Q&A right at the end of the session, so do write down any questions. If they're specifically about the topics, things that aren't in the work programme text, I'll be collating all of those and actually taking those to a couple of events where I'll be meeting with other Challenge 6 NCPs and also the European Commission directly. So I'll be able to ask all of those. So either during this session or afterwards, if you think of anything, once you've had a bit of a chance to sit down with the work programme, please let me know. I'll be travelling to those at the beginning of November, so you've got the next couple of weeks to get any queries, questions, comments over to me, and then we'll have another webinar at the end of November. The date's not yet set, where we'll be able to go over a bit more of the political drivers, motivations, context behind the topics rather than just the topic basics. Okay, so I am the NCP. ESRC hosts two of the NCP roles. So these are to provide guidance. So there's a help desk service, there are website pages, Twitter account, and I support the UK programme committee delegate. There is one caveat to the advice I give. I can't comment on the science of the proposal, so I can help you with most things, but the science it's just not practical for me to give high-level scientific advice to experts on all the different topics that are covered in Horizon 2020. These are the two different email addresses that I use. You can contact me at either. There's a kind of arbitrary divide between Societal Challenge 6 and embedding social sciences and humanities across Horizon 2020, but I am behind both of them. This, for most of you, will probably be familiar. This is Horizon 2020 structure. There's the three main pillars you can see there. I'm going to start off by talking about Societal Challenge 6, which you can see on the right-hand side in the Societal Challenges pillar. So this is Europe in a Changing World, Inclusive, Innovative and Reflective Societies, which is why it often gets shortened to Societal Challenge 6. This is the top-down part of Horizon 2020, so it's much more, well, it is directed as opposed to Pillar 1, which is bottom-up. This is supposed to kind of build on previous work programmes and take into consideration all of the changes that have been happening in recent times within Europe, financial crisis, huge rises in migration, and how Europe fits into the global community. So there are lots of opportunities within here. These are mainly, they are grouped around three major themes. These are the budgets for the 2020 calls in each area. Each one of these themes is called a call, which is slightly different if you normally apply for ESRC calls. Within each of these themes, otherwise known as calls for Horizon 2020, there are topics. which you then apply for. But each theme is kind of, it groups a number of topics in a certain area. So we have migration, looking at flows, narratives, integration, lessons from the past, and the successful integration of migrants into European communities. Transformations is short for socio-economic and cultural transformations stemming from the fourth industrial revolution. Very catchy. So this is really around social economy, entrepreneurship, cultural heritage, and around the introduction of lots more technology into everyday life, whether that be AI, big data, Internet of Things, and particularly how those affect public services and public administration. Governance for the future. There's lots in here about trust in public institutions, their legitimacy, the historical and cultural evolution of governance, and how multi-level governance is functioning and how it can function better. These are a couple of basic information. I have to say I have hidden a few of the basic slides that you may have seen in previous presentations. I will be unhiding those when I share those all with you. So if you do have any questions about the basics, I didn't want to spend too long dwelling on this today, but have also recently updated the ESRC Horizon 2020 web pages. So you can also visit the website, have a look at those. There's a few more bits of explanation, these slides, and of course you can ask me any questions at any point. Just email, phone. I will try to pick up or get back to you as soon as possible. So there are 23 topics open for Societal Challenge 6 in 2020, and you can see how those are distributed across the 3 calls this year. The important date that you need to know is that all of the calls close on Thursday, the 12th of March 2020. I would obviously recommend you not waiting until this date, but it's useful to have that in your mind when you're working backwards about how long it's going to take you to put these together. They do take a long time, and I would suggest starting as soon as possible if you have not already. In terms of maximum funding and maximum duration, it's not the same as UKRI or ESRC calls where there's normally a specific limit over which you are ineligible. They do normally give a guide in the work programme, especially for what level of funding you should be applying for, but you can normally go kind of maybe 10% up or down. You will need to give an extra layer of justification, you know, if you're going beyond what is recommended, I suppose. You can find all of the information on how proposals are evaluated in the general annexes, which I've got a link to there. Professor McCraig will be talking a bit more about evaluation later on. If you do have any specific questions or anything isn't clear, because it does vary depending on the topic that you apply for, then please do get in contact. Right, on to the topics themselves. This is the budget for migration in 2020. So there's 29 million euros available overall over these 4 topics, one of which is dual action. We'll start with that one. So the dual action means that here you can see RIA or IALS. So that means research and innovation action is one topic that you can apply for, and then there's the innovation action lump sum, and that is a separate topic that you apply for. So you should not try and meet both criteria. You choose either the research and innovation action or the innovation action lump sum part to apply for. So there's 9 million available, and each project, whether it's an RIA or the IALS, should be around 3 million. I'm not clear whether there are supposed to be 2 RIA or 1 RIA or vice versa? That's one of my questions I'm going to be asking the Commission. The innovation action is focusing on host countries, kind of past existing and potential mechanisms to support integration. So there's a bit more of a historical slant in some ways. And the expected impacts are new tools, or they include new tools for enhancing the integration of migrants across Europe. So these should be tested, scalable, replicable, and adaptable. That's quite a common theme for the innovation actions, for them to produce outputs which are then scalable and adaptable to different contexts across Europe. The RIA is focused on migrant receiving spaces, local communities, whether that be urban or rural, and any frictions between local and a higher level of governance. There's specific mentions of comparisons with non-European societies, so in Africa, the Middle East, Canada. So if you are thinking about addressing this topic, I would look for partners in those other countries. The impacts for this include analysis for better understanding the phenomenon, so identifying approaches and practices which can be applied in both cities and rural communities. There's also the gender aspect specifically mentioned. So this is a bit of information about the lump sum. It's a relatively new addition, and this is a pilot. I won't go through this in too much detail now, but if you want to have a look through this information and let me know if you do have any questions, if you're considering applying, I'm happy to answer those, or we can go to Stephen, who is our excellent legal and financial NCP, who has all the answers. It's basically supposed to represent a shift away from financial management at the end of the project towards a kind of more detailed application and financial process up front. So it does kind of change where the effort goes in to preparing your proposal and your award. But yeah, as I say, we can talk about this in more detail if you have any questions about this specific topic. Migration 5, this is an innovation action. There's a whole list of aspects of which at least 3 dimensions should be covered. So that's including roles and attitudes of families, gender aspects, civil society organisation and local service providers, practices for language learning and use of native languages alongside the language used at schools. That's all in the work programme, so you can look through those and see the different dimensions that should be paid attention to. They're also in the work programme specifically mentions that a focus should be paid to existing educational centres around Europe which have high rates of migrant and ethnic minority children and are achieving academic results above the national averages. And there is also mention of co-creation specifically in the design and delivery of services to hear the voices of children within this innovation action. So the impact should be producing effective practices for integrating migrants, children in schools and more broadly in society as a whole. Again, these actions and practices should be adaptable, scalable and replicable in different environments. I will be able to say replicable by the end of this webinar. Right, DT migration 9. So I haven't spoken much about the focus areas yet. That's in some of the slides which I've hidden. DT is one of the focus areas, and again, there's more information on the website. It means that the budget comes from a different part of the European Commission. So the budget doesn't come directly from the Societal Challenge 6 budget, and so the focus can be slightly different in this case, slightly more ICT and technologically based. So this is really on the role of ICT and social media, literary and artistic representations, cultural heritage, such as museums, and the work programme specifically encourages the inclusion of countries of origin and transit, so not just host countries. The impact should be informing practitioners, the impact of their conduct and policy choices, and improving the access and dissemination of information on narratives of migration and their effects. So they're hoping for a more informed debate on migration and more informed perception of migration. And the last migration topic this year is Migration 10. This specifically mentions gender-related aspects and measuring the impact of the actions implemented. So participatory techniques supposed to be included to extract policy implications from research findings. The expected impacts are to establish a solid and readily accessible evidence base in support of migration and integration policies. The work programme specifically mentions advancing the EU urban agenda and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it would be wise to tie those in carefully to your proposal. Right, we move on to the second theme, the second call, transformations. There's quite a few more topics here. The budget overall is 83 million euros for 2020. And we're going to go slightly out of order. So I haven't mentioned it. I've got a couple of other colleagues here, including Conrad from AHRC, so from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And he's just going to introduce the first couple of topics which have a bit more of an arts and humanities slant to them. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Conrad for the next couple of topics.
Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everybody. I'll start off with Transformations 12, which is on curation of digital assets and advanced digitization. This is a research and innovation action. As you'll see, there's 13.5 million available, and they're looking to fund 4 or 5 projects of around 3 million euros. Proposals should be involving IT and SSH actors. It should be taking into account that resources evolve over time through cultural impacts, research and curation. Proposals should also be thinking about how they connect the tangible and intangible, and how stories will emerge as a means to enhance our understanding, European understanding of cultural heritage. The impact should be looking at how its proposals demonstrate how the new technologies, methods and data formats help to present cultural, historical remains and memories in a comprehensive and attractive way through scientifically based methods as well. And we should also be looking at how we deliver solutions to the problem that language change hampers static ways of retrieving the information from historic data collections. But ultimately, the European Commission is looking at how we can better promote Europe's cultural heritage. Transformations 19, Culture Beyond Borders. This is a coordinated support action, 6 million euros, 2 projects at 3 million euros. The proposals here should be looking at how to prepare travelling exhibitions, or looking at travelling exhibitions or shared digital exhibitions over the course of the proposal. You should be looking at how you will be identifying specific research, innovation and training needs for policymakers for improving cooperation of European museums and heritage sites. The impact that they're looking to get from these proposals is for the projects to create a representative and geographically balanced European network, to develop and share best practices, to support knowledge exchange between museum creators, curators, conservators and management, and to provide an agenda with key research and innovation challenges in the sector. Transformations 20, European Competence Centre for the Preservation and Conservation of Monuments and Sites. So this is another coordinated support action, 3 million euros. For this one, they're looking to fund just one project. Proposals should be looking here at acting as a facilitator for access to finance and mapping possibilities, bringing together multidisciplinary expertise, such as historians, archaeologists, architects, geographers, conservation scientists, craftsmanship, and social and human sciences. And the impact they're looking to find from here is to increase the quality of preservation initiatives undertaken by cultural heritage institutions, and to demonstrate how it will contribute to an increase in the number and quality of digitised monuments and documents. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Conrad. It's nice to hear a different voice to mine, for at least a bit. Yeah, so moving on, so skipping a bit backwards and forwards here within the work programme. So going back to DT Transformations 2. This is a multi-annual project, so some of you may already be familiar with it. Disruptive technologies in this context cover everything from blockchain, big data, Internet of Things, virtual and augmented reality, and proposals should be piloting these technologies with multidisciplinary partners and stakeholders. It's also important, the work plan specifically mentions that proposals should develop business plans for the long-term sustainability of these services. So anything which is planned should have a longer-term implementation strategy. There is also a specific link in the work programme referencing digital innovation hubs, which should be experimented with in any project that is proposed. The expected impacts are pathways for introducing disruptive technologies, the enhancement of knowledge on digital governance, so there's more knowledge out there, and the development of new ways of providing public services. Transformations 4. So this specifically mentions exploring the use of EU structural investment funds, and including partnerships between EU and non-EU countries of the Balkans and the Eastern neighbourhood or the Mediterranean. So this approach to urban and regional development through cultural tourism should be covering European networks of heritage sites, like the European Heritage Label sites or European cultural routes. The expected impacts are to contribute to improvements in sustainable cultural tourism policies, and providing strategic guidance at European level, for example, with the European Structural Investment Funds, and more understanding of the impact of cultural tourism on European economic and social development and on cultural Europeanisation. Transformations 10. This evolving European media landscapes and Europeanisation specifically mentions gender aspects and also comparisons with other past media revolutions. So there's a few angles to this one. The expected impacts should be filling in the knowledge gap concerning rapid transformations of the European media landscape in its global context. So it doesn't specifically mention involving partners from outside of Europe, but perhaps those aspects should be explored anyway, even if you don't have those global partners. There should be reliable forecasts produced about the European media landscape's evolution, and a rigorous analysis of how European political and cultural spaces are evolving and their prospects should be delivered. Transformations 15. So the overarching goals are to analyse, explore and consider solutions to the challenges and opportunities social and technological innovations bring to society. And so trying to understand how society and innovations are mutually interdependent. Now, this one is one I've included for information. You should not be applying for this. I have written that in capitals there, but do not apply for this. So this is one which national funders will join together to apply for. So this may result in a year's time in, for example, a North Face call. So this is just to flag up to you that something in this area, so these ERANETs result in joint calls coordinated by a network of national funders within Europe. So just to kind of be aware that a call in this area will come up. Transformations 18. This is technological transformation, skills and globalization. So proposals here should identify priority areas and content for policies that would make sharing the benefits of technological change and globalization more equally and widely available. So specifically mentions participation of relevant partners from third countries, including developed, emerging and developing countries. So all levels of partners there. The impacts include, or expected impacts include, contributing to inclusive and evidence-based policy choices, and also producing specific methods and processes of upgrading skills, mobility and labour markets. I'm going to try and pick up the pace a bit because I realise we've got 3 minutes left of our original half-an-hour slot and I'm not quite at governance yet. So DT Transformations 21. This is another CSA, coordination and support action. Again, if you're not familiar with this kind of terminology, then feel free to get in contact or have a little read of the web pages. The expected impacts for this CSA are meaningful and ambitious indicators on how the whole requested range of impacts will be measured. So they've got quite a detailed description on how they anticipate this mentoring scheme to be implemented. So I'd recommend reading the work programme, and they want a significant number of schools involved, developing a whole school approach. Transformations 22. So we've got the CSA and RIA here. So again, don't apply for both, please pick one. The expected impacts for the research and innovation action are to support the advancement and uptake of effective and efficient practices in order to reverse inequalities. The action should deliver best practices and new methodologies where appropriate, which can be scalable and replicable by other projects and stakeholders. The CSA, the impact of that action should be to draw policy lessons from previous topics in this field, so bringing together through the networks and conferences different stakeholders to coordinate their efforts. Right, and the last transformations topic for 2020, Transformations 23. This is specifically related to the Web Accessibility Directive. So that has come into practice as from September this year, and it establishes accessibility requirements for websites and mobile applications of public sector bodies. So they need to be complying with this as of now. The expected impact of this CSA is to support the implementation of this Web Accessibility Directive and overall contributing to the recognition or widespread recognition of the benefits of accessible digital services. Right, last call, governance. Again, we've got a few topics here, so my apologies for overrunning already at such an early stage. 66 million euros is available for the governance call for 2020 topics. Please note that governance 21 here in the work programme is mistakenly identified as part of the security union focus area, so with an SU prefix, but that is in the process of being corrected. in case that influences the angle you take with your proposal. So DT Governance 5, this specifically mentions involving multidisciplinary teams to explore the complexity of this challenge. So it specifically mentions the legal, cultural and managerial risks and barriers. So please ensure that you have experts in those areas included. The expected impact includes solutions for opening up and connecting public administration data and services. So to have measurable impact for both businesses and citizens, leading to efficiency gains. SU Governance 7, so this takes into account previous calls in the earlier work programs in 2014 and 2016-17. These are names, so you can look those up in the work program. Cooperation with partners from third countries is encouraged in order to have comparative perspectives. So please bear that in mind. So the expected impacts are to contribute to increased coherence between EU foreign policy and member states' foreign policies. So they're expecting policymakers to be well informed on the governance structures needed to ensure joined up and sustainable EU diplomatic action and international cooperation. SU Governance 9, addressing radicalisation through social inclusion. So there should be empirical and multidisciplinary approaches involved, and the proposal should focus on psychological and social mechanisms of alienation and radicalisation of youth in urban and peri-urban contexts. The expected supports are to provide a holistic evidence base to support situation analysis and increase the capacity to identify and reach at-risk groups. The ultimate goal is to increase awareness and resilience in at-risk demographics and introduce preventive, countering and de-radicalisation approaches as applicable. DT Governance 12. So this is a pilot on the use of the European cloud infrastructure for public administrations. Proposals should tackle the ethical issues and problems raised by big data co-creation. The aim is to create reusable models that allow for more accurate, more efficient development of management policies related to health, emergency responses, weather warnings. So the expected impacts of this innovation action are to create analytical tools and enable the reuse of common infrastructures and data sets. Governance 20. So this builds specifically on another topic, ENG globally 09-2016, if any of you are involved in previous work programs. So there are currently centres of European research and innovation in Brazil, China, US. You can find more details of these on the funding and tenders portal if you look up that previous topic. And this is to extend that network. So there's enough to fund 2 or 3 of these networks, these centres, at least one for India, one for Africa, but it doesn't preclude proposals in other similar areas or countries. Legal entities established in the target country or region are eligible for funding from the Union, just to clear that up. And the expected impacts are for enhanced impact of results from research and innovation projects, including those under Horizon 2020, through increased access to excellence and to markets across the world. So high visibility for European research and innovation across international partner countries. SU Governance 21. This has a really long and detailed description in the work programme. So some of the work programme topics, I'm sure some of you will notice, are shorter than others. This one has a lot of detail, so I'd really recommend giving it a thorough read. I mean, I know I've tried to capture the key points here on the slide, but there's lots in there which I haven't been able to put on. In the EU context, the notion of the public sphere is specifically mentioned as the key deliberative element. So this should be reconsidered both conceptually and empirically in view of the economic, social and political crises and developments of recent years. The expected impact is to move our understanding of deliberative and participatory democratic processes to another level and identify ways of how they can be improved in practice. So how to create arenas or spaces, open systems which are conducive to collective decisions made through public deliberation. I think quite a big aim. DT Governance 22. Sorry, we are coming to the end, don't worry. So this is aiming to put citizens at the heart of government's digital transformation at cities and regional level. And the expected impact of this CSA is to show the social and human dimension of digitalisation. So there's an emphasis on the movement of local and regional administrations towards citizen-centric, secure, high quality and burden-free public services and towards more inclusive participative decision and policy making. Governance 23. So this is aiming at enhancing trust and coherence amongst the members through transparent, open and collaborative processes involving national and European policymakers, research and innovation communities and citizens, so all levels of stakeholders. This is a relatively small CSA. The proposal should increase the capacity and diversity of research and innovation policy advice available in each member state by opening up the possibility for national think tanks to source or discuss expertise and advice from think tanks in other member states. So in the short term, the impact should be a reinforced network collaboration between national R&I policy advisors. Long term, the aim is to facilitate the strategic alignment of R&I policies in Europe. Right, thank you for listening. Apologies for overrunning quite significantly. I'm hoping to shorten the last two presentations, so I won't hold you beyond 11 a.m. The last couple of slides, this is just a reminder that if you do have any questions on specific topics, so in-depth topic questions or partner requests even, I will be going to a couple of different events which I'll be able to talk to potential European partners, other European Social Societal Challenge 6 NCPs and also the European Commission directly. So please do get in contact if once you've had a bit of a think, you have questions or you want to know more about a specific topic. As I said, I've updated the ESRC website, so these are just some links which I'll send round. And there are some other non-ESRC useful links, which I think will, be a useful reference for anyone if you don't already know about them. These are my contact details as ever, and we will now move swiftly on to the evaluation presentation. So if you'll just bear with me a couple of minutes, Professor Ronald McQuaid is going to be joining us directly from the University of Stirling, so I just have to swap over so that he is taking over the screen. Okay, Ron, hopefully you can hear me, and I think hopefully we should be able to hear you soon as well. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation now, and I think you should be able to take over. Right, let's see. There you are.
You see that? Oh. You hear
I
me?
do. If you could turn your volume up, that would be good. And we can't quite see your presentation yet. So I think you have to click on the green share arrow.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we can hear you.
Okay, I'll go back. I sort of pressed the green share, but I'll try again. Right, share. Okay. Any luck?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
I'm going to turn my mic off now, but we still have 15 minutes for this. I think this is going to be a really valuable part of this webinar, so don't worry about I'm trying to wrap it into 5 minutes. So we'll just adjust those last two presentations at the end. Thanks, Professor McQuaid.
Okay,
Oh,
thanks.
I should mention before you start, I just want to make a couple of things clear. That Professor McQuaid is unable to answer questions giving advice about specific proposals. So in a similar way to the fact that this isn't really the forum for it, but also he has specific kind of guidelines to adhere to as a previous evaluator. We can't be seen to be given kind of an advantage to specific projects. If you do have a specific project question which you think you might have a view on, you can send it to me and we can evaluate that after the webinar, but that shouldn't be done now. Is that okay, Professor McQuaid?
That's fine. Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so just to go through, I've been involved in evaluating projects for maybe about 15 years, I think, I'm not sure, in various calls. I've also been quite active. I think I had about 20 projects funded by the EU, but those range from very small ones to various different funding things, but including about 7 framework projects. So the disclaimer before I start is, what I'm about to show in my presentation, these are purely my personal views, and they're based on being both an a priori evaluator, but also more recently been also a reviewer of existing framework projects as well. They don't reflect the views of anyone else. RIA in the commission, RIA, they evaluate the proposals, the SRC or anyone else, and I'm sure other evaluators will disagree with me on lots of what I say. And also evaluations priorities do change. There's no secret recipe, but some organizations seem to have incredible records. Particularly, I would say, project management type organizations, maybe in Spain or elsewhere, who appear to be, have got a certain formula which works quite often. But I don't think there's any secret recipe, and different calls of different priorities, and over time, there's a change in emphasis. So I think over time, there's been an increased emphasis on impact. Is research actually going to have an impact? Also, so I would just say anything I say, treat with a caution and a large dose of skepticism. So who are the evaluators? Well, lots of evaluators from across the EU and beyond, from across the globe, mixed discipline. You think of social sciences, psychology, economics, management, etc., sociology, etc. There's a great mixture of preferred methodological approaches by gender, nationality, language, age, experience, etc. So a huge range of people are evaluators. They're not all academics, but they do have a research background. And they are all very careful to avoid conflicts of interest. So you have to be very careful that we don't have any link to people that are projects that we're evaluating. When you score an evaluation, there's a large number of proposals. And usually any single evaluator will only see a small percentage of them. So there might be 100 and you might see 10 or less or more. An individual reviewer then only sees a small number of proposals. But for each proposal, there's normally 3 evaluators, 3 reviewers. And so one single reviewer can't really swing the score normally. It is actually quite a fair process in that way. There is consistency between the different proposals because particularly the vice chairs, they oversee the comments made by the reviewers. They don't read the actual proposals themselves, there'll be too many, but they oversee the comments of reviewers, make sure the comments are consistent with the scores, and there's some discussion at various points. So the reviewers, that's the evaluators, like myself, judge the proposals against the guidance in the call. And that's, there's no secret to it. It's simply look at the guidance, what are they asking for, and respond to that. Usually there are 3 sections: excellence, impact, and implementation. Well, for each of these 3 sections, you normally score from 0 to 5 on using half marks as well, so 4.5, 3.5, etc. If you want to get funded, unless you're in a proposal where there's very little competition, you are really looking at 4.5s, 4.5, 5s for all of your 3 areas. For innovation actions, then the ranking will actually focus more on impact, while generally it's the excellence will be the, if there's a tie, so to speak, there's various rules on how you separate proposals, and excellence usually is one of the key ones. But for innovation actions, impact is key. When you're scoring proposals, there's an intense competition. There are a large number of proposals. Sorry, we're going the wrong way. Excellent. Sorry about that. Now for excellence, I assume you know your areas, why your proposal is brilliant scientifically, but you still need to show this, and you've got to be very clear. What are the objectives, and explicitly set them out. How are you going to do it? If the reviewers cannot clearly understand what you're proposing, including the why and the how of what you're proposing, you're very unlikely to score well. Now, excellence, I won't talk much about, because I would say the vast majority of proposals score very well in excellence, because they are well thought out. People care about what they want to propose. But the key thing to remember is that there's 3 sections, and it's a negative scoring in a way. So you may be brilliant and you score 5 on the excellent bit, brilliant proposal. A lot of other ones will score 4, 4.5, 5, so not much difference there. But if you miss something in the implementation or the impact, then you start losing marks. And so no matter how brilliant you are in your proposal, if you lose too many marks in the other 2 sections, you're out. So a sure sign of a failing bid is a lack of attention to implementation or impact sections, even assuming you're getting a maximum of 5 on your excellence. What might a reviewer look for then? Well, you follow the call on the application form guidance. That's what they really are focusing on a lot. If you do not explicitly answer a question, then you probably will lose marks, because if the reviewer cannot understand exactly what you're doing, then there has to be a weakness in the proposal. Superficial answers are inadequate, but succinct answers may be okay. You've got to show that you've fully thought through what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And you've got to show things like, why should the EU be funding this project if it could be done just as well in one country or one university? So you've got to show that the proposal's sum is greater than the parts. Are the partners complementary? You can't just say, yes, they are. You've got to show, well, in what ways are they complementary? Is it their research areas or expertise in some particular form or another? What does a pan-European project actually add over a national project? So you've got to show that actually that this EU funding will make a difference. You can't just state that it will, you've got to show. Now, all parts of the proposal matter. So if you're going to do something on impact, and you say you're going to do a project website and social media, well, you can instantly hear the snores, because everybody does that. How are you going to use these, say, the website to attract users into? How are you going to attract people to use it? Type of people you want. What type of people are you trying to attract? How will this advance the project's impact? How will you measure that you actually attracted the right people? These are some of the questions that often an evaluator would ask. And yet some people just say, oh, we'll have a project website. Well, I'm afraid you've certainly not demonstrated that you're going to provide an effective project website, which is what we really want, is an effective one, not just any website. So evaluators can only evaluate what's on the page. They might think, oh, if you just did this, that would make it really good. I'm afraid you can't. Evaluators don't do that, can't do that. So they evaluate what's on the page, not what the proposal might do if you made some changes to it. So if you don't tell the evaluator, then assume that it doesn't happen. Some minimum expectations then would be, if you cannot answer the basic questions like who, what, why, how, then really have you thought through the project? It'd be very hard to convince an evaluator that you've thought it through if you haven't been able to answer those clearly. And issues that are mentioned in the call. So we say like gender. So some people say, oh, gender, we've got X number of men and X number of women. Well, that's hardly a thought through response to the issue of gender if that's mentioned in the call. So in gender, you might say, well, we've got a balance across the research teams, and within each of the teams, balance at different levels, etc. There may be a gender dimension to the research as well as that. And there's also maybe the issues of unconscious gender bias and evaluations. These are how they're going to be overcome, etc. So you're certainly looking at, just saying you've got different genders in your team, it's not really adequate. Or just mentioning, oh, by the way, one of our independent variables is gender, really shows superficial, not serious consideration of the gender issue. Same thing with cross-cutting themes. It could be, well, gender could be one of the various cross-cutting themes depending on the proposal. Interdisciplinarity, again, that's superficial, or are you actually talking about interdisciplinary? Or are you simply talking about a number of silos who happen to talk together? What about international cooperation? Again, is it real? How? Show us how it is. All this has to be done very, very succinctly. Then have you really shown that you've the capacity to do the project? Just because you happen to come from a top university doesn't mean you have the capacity, etc. You've got to show that you actually have the capacity to do this project. And also do the CVs of the projects, show the necessary competence and experience, etc. So a little bit more. High impact journals, well, oh yeah, we're going to do open source. Well, is it green or is it gold, or what type of journal? Maybe you want to give an example, perhaps. And it is high impact journals that generally you're looking for, not just any journal article. Of course, it's what is high impact and subjective. So, that's a very difficult problem, but issue. But generally high impact is what they'd be looking for. Also, policymakers, how do you identify and how do you engage with policymakers? How will you maximize the impact on policymakers? The same with the general public. Are you going to go around schools afterwards and talk to pupils? Are you going to engage public events? Are you doing press articles, etc., etc.? So there are lots of ways, but it's about how are you going to do these things? Not just, yes, we're going to engage the public. So you've got to be very careful about what the various groups of people that you're going to be approaching you're trying to increase your impact through. So what are the various groups that are key to your project having an impact? The last thing I would say is Brexit. Well, experts, the clear guidance, experts should not evaluate proposals with UK participants any differently from the others. So that's the way it's been. Personal perspective, my own experience, I think there's been little evidence of any bias. So far, I know that there's appears to be a lot of EU partners are not keen on UK having UK partners at the moment because of the huge uncertainty, but I think that's a different issue. I'm only talking about when they're being evaluated. So when I've seen evaluations in the last couple of years, when UK people have been part of it, there's been very, very little evidence that people have held this, been biased against this. And I think that's it. Good luck with your proposal. Think through, but succinctly make sure you answer all the criteria, etc., that are asked for in the call. And any questions?
Thank you very much, Professor McCaig. Right, I think I'm having a little trouble accessing the chat right now, so I'm just going to adjust the screen. I didn't want to do it while you were doing your presentation, so I'm sorry if this disrupts it in any way. Hopefully it won't. Right. Ooh. Thank you. Okay. Right, if you do have any questions, I can now see those on the chat. I can't see any so far, not in the Q&A either, but perhaps people will have more later on, or perhaps your presentation was just so comprehensive that that people don't have anything they need to ask right now.
That's fine.
So someone just said, really interesting, thanks, especially the bit about negative scoring. So I think it helps to have that in mind, that people are really kind of, you know, working to that high standard in all those different aspects. Oh, someone has raised their hand. Let me just try and see who that is. My apologies. I'm not sure why I can't see who has raised their hand. Okay, so I've got one question from, oh, sorry. Yes, Anwar Tilili, sorry, I'm not pronouncing your name very well. If you would like to ask about the panel, let me just see whether I can allow you to talk. Maybe that's easiest. Okay, I'm trying to unmute you, but it's not working.
Right.
Can you
Hello?
speak now? Hi, hello, Anwar.
Oh,
Please feel free to
hello.
ask your question.
I'm really very glad that I can be heard. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. This is really very useful. I would like to ask Professor McQuaid about the composition of the panel. Hello?
Hello? Yep.
Yeah. So you said it's composed of people, academics and non-academics, but everyone's got a research background. I was wondering if among those are people who we would call in the UK other stakeholders, non-academic stakeholders, with a bit of awareness about the research background that feeds into their sectors, i.e. people from professional organizations, for example, policymakers, and users of research, impact, and such like.
Yeah, I think in a way I can only give my view as sort of being one of the reviews, and I don't see the overall picture. But yes, there are people from, say, third sector organisations, etc., who are part of it. Because again, the view is it's not just about the academic research; it's about the impact it's going to have, etc. So these views and expertise are very valuable. So I think there is quite a range. Now, the reviewers, though, are there purely as an individual. So even if you worked for, say, a government department or whatever, you'd be there as an individual, not as a representative of that sector or that whatever. And you have to be very clear that you're totally unbiased. So if you're working in a third sector organization in the UK, you cannot be biased in favor of either the third sector or UK applications. That would be totally beyond the pale. Yeah. So there's a wide range. For the three people that are selected, they are selected by the RIA, which is the Research Executive Agency, evaluation agency, so they'll just pick three people who've got complementary in some way, expertise, etc. And they'll decide. And then there are other stages where the vice chairs will have some input, etc. But the reviewers are sure. If I'm seeing 10 projects, I will have different other two reviewers on each of the 10, perhaps. Yeah. So they mix up the reviewers a lot.
Right. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. All right. I'm just gonna turn off your mic now. So thank you, Anwar, for that question. Unless there's anyone else, I don't think I've got any more hand raises or questions coming through in the chat. If you do think of anything afterwards, then feel free to email in. But otherwise, thank you so much, Professor McQuaid. It's been really useful. Really, really appreciate you giving up your time and spending this time on the webinar with us. So
it's been a pleasure.
It's been really helpful for everyone. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Would you be able to stop sharing your presentation now? Oh, I think you have already. Great. Okay. I'm going to disable your video now as well, and I'm just going to continue with the rest of this. But I'll let you know if we hear anything else from people after the rest of the webinar. So thank you very much for your contribution. Really, really useful. So thank you. Hello everyone. Right, I think you can see more of my cursor moving than I'd ideally want, but this is better than what it was. So let's move on without further ado. My apologies for the delay. So I'm now going to just run through quickly where you can look for opportunities for social science, arts and humanities researchers outside of Societal Challenge 6. So obviously what we've been speaking about so far has been only about Societal Challenge 6, so just around those three themes: migration, governance and the societal transformations. But there is so much more that social science, arts and humanities can and does contribute to. So again, here's the structure. There are the three main pillars, and I'm just going to go through them one by one. Something which I want to draw your attention to, this is from the fourth monitoring report. So this is the SSH integration monitoring report, which I will link to at the end, just to show you that I think it's 67 or 69% of the budget which goes to SSH partners within Horizon 2020. So this is just in societal challenges and the industrial leadership pillar. So only 2/3 of that is in Societal Challenge 6. So, sorry, only 1/3 of that is within Societal Challenge 6. So the other 2/3 is outside in other topics in Horizon 2020. So we've already briefly mentioned SSH in evaluation, but just to let you know that in topics flagged as SSH relevant on the Funding and Tenders portal, the evaluators are briefed on how to identify and evaluate SSH aspects, and evaluation panels should ideally include SSH expertise. In practice, we find that this isn't always the case, but it is improving slowly. First of all, we have the excellent science pillar. So this is the bottom-up pillar. I think many of you will be familiar with. So this is really researcher-driven and frontier research. So the ERC is extremely competitive, but very open. You can submit any idea for your research to this call. UPCRO hosts the NCPs for ERC and also the Marie Curie actions. So these are based around mobility and network building. If you want more information about any of these areas, then get in contact and I can put you in contact with the right NCP, or we can have a discussion about what is available. But it's so open that, of course, there are opportunities for social scientists all across these, throughout this pillar. SSH and industrial leadership, perhaps maybe less obvious, I don't know, maybe, but there are lots of opportunities for SSH researchers here as well. So this is really kind of strengthening the link between the innovations which are being proposed and the society which they're being used in. So really making sure that these are practically able to be integrated and will be used. I just wanted to say on this that, again, in the monitoring report, so the latest monitoring report, which was released earlier this year, covers 2017 topics. So it is a couple of years behind just because of the amount of data involved. But in the ICT call, for example, I think it's something like 34% of the SSH flag topics 34% of the proposals funded under the SSH flag topic. So I think 9 out of 22 were led by SSH partners. So not just that those beneficiaries were involved, but they were leading these consortia. So just to be aware that you should be searching in this pillar as well. So there's also a ton of opportunities in the societal challenges pillar. So we've spoken about one challenge, societal challenge 6, and you saw how many topics were open this year. And there are opportunities in the other 6 challenges. So there are 7 in total. And really there are opportunities for SSH researchers in any and all of these. These are kind of some of the aspects that that you might expect to see SSH researchers contributing to in each of the other societal challenges, but it's by no means comprehensive. This is just an idea of where SSH researchers could be involved in each of those challenges. Again, there are NCPs for each of these challenges, and if you get in contact with me, we can work out between us and the other societal challenge NCPs where your idea or where your researcher's idea will best fit, and what they can do or what they should be including, or who they can partner with. If you really don't know where to go, but you've got an area or a topic in mind, sorry, not a topic in the official EU sense, but in the general idea sense, you can go to the Funding and Tenders portal. So there's a link here which should take you straight there. So when I share the slides, you'll be able to see. You scroll down on the page that you get to, and then you can filter by cross-cutting priority, and you can filter by the SSH flag. If this isn't clear when you get to it, then feel free to phone up. I know that websites don't always play ball. You can see how I coped with the technology this morning. So we can work it out together. I promise that most days I'm better than this. Another really important resource is the Net for Society report. So Net for Society is the network of Societal Challenge 6 NCPs, but it's not just about Societal Challenge 6. They do a lot of work identifying opportunities for researchers across Horizon 2020. So they spend a lot of time once the work programs are updated to identify SSH dedicated topics, SSH relevant topics, and topics with minor SSH relevance. So varying levels. But this is kind of a long PDF document that if you don't want to search on the Funding and Tenders portal by keyword or by kind of call, you can just do a free text search within this document, or you can have a look through if you want to. It is long, so you might want to cut it down slightly, but really helpful. I've got a couple of examples of SSH relevant topics. So this is one from the Transport Societal Challenge. In my notes, I did have the exact closing date and how and what the budget was, but unfortunately, due to the technological issues, I can't remember the exact dates, and I don't want to give you the wrong idea. But if you click on the link that I've got there, you can find all the information on this topic, and you can see here some examples of how SSH researchers could be involved in this proposal. So this has got a lot of SSH relevant language and needs in the work program. There's another topic with minor SSH relevance. So this has less SSH relevance overall as a topic, but still I think a significant amount, and the budget for this was huge, if I remember correctly. So there are real opportunities elsewhere, even if you're taking part as a beneficiary and not as a coordinator. to really look out for those other topics where your researchers are able to take part in these opportunities. So if you need any more information or you have a specific topic, so just talk to me. We can look together where would be good. These are some useful links. At the top there is the recently updated ESRC page. There's the monitoring report, which I mentioned. There is another compilation of topics document compiled by SysNet. So that's the network of SWAF's national contact points, and that's been recently released. So it has a slightly different angle to the Net for Society one, but could still be useful, worth a look. And at the bottom there are a couple of kind of they're just short kind of leaflets, so about successful integration, how to go about it, and just success stories from all the different areas of Horizon 2020, in case you need any inspiration for how SSH researchers can be integrated into projects outside of Societal Challenge 6, and not just integrated, I mean, they're also leading as well. In terms of SSH relevant news, I'm sure many of you are already signed up, and you probably heard me talk about this at a million events, but I do have a mailing list. I send out mailings every couple of weeks. So although it's called the Societal Challenge 6 mailing list, it's not just information about Societal Challenge 6, which would obviously be slightly limited, but also all kinds of other European funding and SSH opportunities. So whether that's different Societal Challenge information events, which maybe you should go along to look for partners in those areas, or whether it's ESRC funding opportunities, which you might still be interested in. So yeah, if you want to sign up or try it out, I can just send you an example and you can decide whether you want to sign up. Then email my usual address, and you can unsubscribe at any point. I will not hold any grudges. I know what it's like to receive too many emails. So yeah, just have a look. Also, I'll share these slides with you, and there's a bit of information there about upcoming events. Obviously, a couple of these, I've just realised that top one was at the beginning of this week, but you might be able to look on the event website and see whether there are any video recordings. I will share those via the mailing list if they exist or when they are released. And there are a couple of specific Societal Challenge 6 information and brokerage events at the bottom there. Again, thank you for listening to this whistle-stop tour. These are my contact details for the kind of cross-cutting area, although, as I say, I'm reachable by both email addresses. Other UK entities can be found directly by clicking on the link at the bottom there, but I'm really happy to help you if you're not sure where to start. That's just if you'd rather do it independently. So now I'm going to move swiftly on to the EU exit update. So I know there's a lot going on this week, and we cannot for sure say what is going to happen, but I think at the moment there are kind of three options: remain, deal, or no deal. At the moment, we are still in the EU. We still have the right to participate in EU funding programs, so we're still treated as normal. If we remain, or if there is a deal found, this would stay the same. So for Horizon 2020, we would still be a member state, or we would still be treated as a member state. So if there was a deal, there would be no change. There's no need to negotiate an associated country agreement in the current deal. Everything would carry on as normal. Now, under a no deal, there are kind of three different parts that I want to talk to you about. So the UK government has committed to funding all successful UK bids submitted before exit. So this means if you submit before the exit date, even if you are notified of your success afterwards, you are covered. Hopefully you already know this. If you don't, or you want to talk about it in more detail, please contact me, or I'll share details of an email address later on for the specific EU grants team. But yeah, there's a whole kind of, they've recently updated the websites as well. So there's loads of information that's been released last week on exactly what you need to gather if this applies to you. There has also been a guarantee extension announced. So I think this was announced last July. And this means that even if you apply after EU exit date calls, I couldn't think of the word, to calls which are open to third country participants. So that is an important part. So you do have to be eligible. So UK participants have to be eligible as a third country. You can still apply, and the UK government will fund the UK part of any successful bids. So they are still submitted to the European Commission for evaluation, the same as any other proposal involving other third countries. And the funding is guaranteed for the lifetime of the project if you're successful. The third aspect, which has recently been announced, I think this was in August, is that, so in the case of some of these mono-beneficiary schemes that you can see there, the ERC, the Marie Curie and the SME schemes, applications which have been submitted before Brexit, if they are not assessed by the European Commission, so we still don't know what the European Commission will do in this case, if they are not assessed, then UKRI will take over the assessment of these applications, and successful applications will be funded for the lifetime of the project. So there are still details to work out for this. There's a whole team dealing with it. I don't think they've been working on it for a while. It's not like this is a surprise, but they have to wait until all the details are finalised before they can publish. So I'm sure that more details will be published as soon as possible. If you want to check in with me at any point and see whether there's been any updates, please feel free to email me or email the appropriate NCPs for those schemes, and they will also be happy to help you. So I think this advice for UK applicants probably ties in a bit with what Professor McQuaid was saying. There's no change to peer review. So the proposals, there's specific guidance here which is given to evaluators about not treating UK proposals any differently, or UK participants, sorry, any differently. And eligibility, which just says that until the UK leaves the EU, we're still a member state and we're still eligible for Horizon 2020 actions. Now, there are questions, I'm sure, about if your eligibility criteria, if you're not sure whether you will still be complying after EU exit. If this applies to you, please email me or email the appropriate NCP, and we are happy to talk to you. There's so much information which is also being released on the UK government website. So I'll share the link for that. I can't remember what they called it, not a fact sheet, but fact something or other, which they released last week. And you will be able to go there and find, I think, most of your answers, if not all. Third countries can still coordinate the consortia. So UPCRO, if you're a subscriber, you'll be able to click on that link and find examples of where third countries can coordinate, or sorry, have coordinated in the past. I think there's examples from Switzerland, Chile and Uruguay. So you can look those up, maybe share them with any European partners who are not sure. Yeah, the eligibility is important in terms of the consortia because you do still need to comply with, for example, for the RIAs or the the research and innovation actions or the innovation actions, there still needs to be a minimum of 3 member states or associated countries involved. So I think this just means that if you're including UK researchers in a consortia, you should make sure that you have at least 3 other member states and associated countries. Now, I think this is pretty normal practice anyway. The consortia are normally a lot bigger than 3 participants, and I think to be on the safe side, you'd be wise to include more anyway. But if you do have any questions about this, let me know. This is about the UKRI portal. Hopefully this again is familiar to you. It's only for use in a no-deal scenario, and we will only contact you and open up the kind of guarantee calls on JES and the IFS in a no-deal scenario, so you can't kind of preempt it. The only thing you can do is fill out the portal application, which I'm sure many of you have already done. If you do have any questions, let me or the EU grants funding team know via that email at the bottom. This is a slide that I got off the EU grants team. They weren't able to attend today, but I am happy to take any questions which I can't answer along to them, and then share those answers along with any other questions that we had from this session when I share the slides, or perhaps a bit afterwards if it takes a bit longer to get an answer. This is just about the guarantee submission process and what it will look like in a no-deal scenario. These calls will only open once that it's certain we are in a no-deal scenario. So at the moment they are not open, and yeah, they will not be unless we are sure that we're in a no-deal scenario. I also wanted to share this. It's not the best quality, I'm sorry. I was converting a PDF to a JPEG and it's gone very fuzzy. This is an excerpt from a recently released leaflet, also from the UKRI team, and this is just to emphasise the commitments from the UK government. So this is available in PDF or in hard copy. If you do want some, then let me know. It's kind of envisaged to be shared with partners, so if you want to take any to conferences, events, workshops, then let me know. It's supposed to make it kind of clear or clearer to other partners or to researchers, even in the UK, you know, what the commitments are and what we're guaranteed for. So hopefully this will be reassuring. If you do have any suggestions, then the team are always open to hear them. So yeah, get in contact if you want any of these. Here are the fact pack, that was it. So here are the useful links that I think really important to look at, especially if you haven't looked at them in the last couple of weeks. They have been updated, really comprehensive, and especially the UK government's fact pack contains information on each of the different scenarios that you might be involved in, and the UKRI preparing for EU exit as well. The last two I think I probably shared before. There's an Upgrade Brexit fact sheet, and that is regularly updated with links to all the major publications, so it's kept up to date really nicely. And there is a BAYS inbox for research-specific concerns. I would ask, if you did email anything to BAYS, if you could copy me in, it would just be really useful to know what is worrying you specifically, and whether there's anything that I can do. So yeah, if you are able to copy me in, if you contact them, that would be useful. Right, thank you for listening. I think that we have a couple of questions. Let me just have a look. So I've got one. It says, some of the calls you have described have a deadline in 2020. If there is no deal Brexit, can UK entities still apply? Yes, this is the perfect question, and yes, you could still apply. As I say, you will need to be careful with the eligibility. So if you're being part of a consortia, then you'll need to make sure that you that you have at least 3 other member states and associated countries. But yes, UK entities can be involved. Yes, they can coordinate. So please don't let EU exit stop you from applying, where you can make a really valuable contribution. I know it's hard, and I know that it might be difficult with European partners. If there's anything that I can do to help, if there's any information that I can send officially, from UKRI, or if you would like me to have a chat with anyone, I am more than happy to do so. I'm aware that this is difficult, but I would be really keen to help where I can. The last question is, will the funding come from the EC or the UK government if we then become a third country? The answer is the UK government. The UK government are committing the funds, and UKRI will be delivering those funds. Now, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to leave there. If you do have any other questions, then email me. Thank you very much for your time, and sorry for overrunning. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day. And thank you for joining. All right, thank you. Bye.